If you've been to the Sun Conference before, please raise your hand. Wow, that's most of us. Wonderful. Thank you for continuing to come back. Last year's conference had the most attendees in a decade, and I'm happy to say that this year exceeded that significantly. So thank you for coming back. This year also has the most sessions in a decade, and as you see, here we go. The author institutions range from industry, the public school system, 2- and 4-year colleges in the region, as well as colleges outside our region and even our continent. And a couple of talks are in Spanish, the ones listed with Spanish titles. A special Sun Conference tradition is pausing academia's pace to celebrate success. For example, each of the last 7 years, the University of Texas system has given Regents Outstanding Teaching Awards, and UTEP's current cohort had a record-tying 10 winners. Now for our non-UTEP attendees, let me explain that this competition involves rigorous reviews of a 150-page dossier of evidence, and winners receive $25,000. Now in the 7 years, UTEP to date now has had 58 winners. If you're looking at the money, that's $1.5 million. And those winners are on the showcase page of the CETL website to inspire us all. Since last school year, CETL has had a ROTA resources webpage and coordinates UTEP's internal review process through a committee of past ROTA winners chaired by Peter Golding. Thanks to the work of Peter's committee, as well as editor extraordinaire Cheryl Torsney, UTEP is sending its next batch to Austin, I think today, and we predict another big batch of winners this summer. So, as I call your name, would each winner of a 2015 Regents Outstanding Teaching Award please come up and stand behind the table, by the frame with your name. First, the contingent faculty category from history, Brad Cartwright. Next, we have the tenure track category where all 3 of UTEP's nominees won. From teacher education, Pei-Ling Shi. From creative writing, who is not able to be here today, Sasha Pimentel. And from electrical and computer engineering, Raymond Rumpf. Next, the tenured category where all 6 UTEP nominees won. From teacher education, David Correjo. From kinesiology, Sandro Dorgo. From mathematical sciences, Helmut Knaust. From music, Oscar Baccioni. From biological sciences, Elizabeth Walsh. From electrical and computer engineering, Homer Nazaran. And let me add an additional thanks to Homer for supporting a culture of mentoring. He helped arrange for a parallel mentoring session at the last fall instructor retreat by CETL, and he is also moderating a mentoring workshop at the Sun Conference here tomorrow afternoon. So thank you, Homer. So now you're each standing behind a mystery object, maybe it's not such a mystery now, covered with our CETL t-shirt. Here's what it looks like, so you can all see what it looks like. It says that teaching is a journey that matters. Necesita. Bilingual thing there. Okay. Because all of us, even teaching award winners, need the stimulation and feedback of events like CETL's to keep progressing. We're not just here for remediation or something. Okay, so on the count of 3, you'll uncover the mystery object by picking up the shirts. Audience drum roll, please. Uno, dos, tres. So these ROTA winners get to keep the shirt to model to the community this message of commitment to teaching and learning that we thank them for, and their pictures will stay on display throughout the conference, and then for the next 12 months, displayed proudly in the library's main floor glass display case. So as they return to their seats, let's give them our thanks and congratulations. By the way, UTEP faculty are also competitive for our teaching awards besides the ROTA. For example, the Faculty Senate's Teaching Effectiveness and Development Committee is going to be launching a resource webpage soon for the Piper Professor Award, so just a heads up there. And whether UTEP faculty or not, all Sun Conference attendees who present a SOTL paper at the Sun Conference are, of course, eligible to compete for the Harry J. Beeson Scholarship Teaching Award, and the winner will be announced at the closing reception tomorrow. Okay, so next we thank those who helped this conference happen. First and foremost, our full-time person keeping CTAL going for the last 6 years and counting, creating everything from budgets to the conference guidebook app, Carla Ramirez. Okay. Dr. Peter Golding is CTAL's Provost Faculty Fellow in Residence, and as I noted, his big role at CTAL is my right-hand ROTA man, but he is also a wonderful overall sounding board, humanizing influence. He has an excused absence today because his daughter is getting married in Australia. But let's let the cameras record that we gave him well-deserved applause for everything he does. We also want to give thanks to CTAL's talented trio of student workers. Our graphic artist, Kai Madrano, who not only did this handsome program, but also gave a great CTAL workshop last month on graphic design principles for effective educational visuals. Let's give Kai a hand. Also, our videographer, Leo Montañez, who he'll be giving a CTAL workshop next month on Beyond a Talking Head, making brief videos that engage students. And our webmaster, Alex Davila, not only keeps our website going, but he set up social media for this year's conference so that conversations can continue after sessions and across sessions, because when you've got 6 sessions going at once, it's hard to be in 6 places at one time. So I actually was able to do my first tweet. I tried it out just to make sure I understood the system. I'm not really a tweeter, but I figured it out, so I think that means anyone can figure it out. And for those of us who are really low-tech, who don't want to tweet, we have marker boards set up outside where you can use sticky note, post-it notes to put your reactions to things throughout the 2 days. But for those of you who do tweet, here's some instructions of how it works. You can see the hashtags, the account to tag, and we will have to give you incentive to really do this. There will be a prize for the most liked tweet as of 5 o'clock tomorrow, and we'll give that prize out at the closing reception. So we encourage you to share those insights with everyone else. We also thank UTEP Conference Services and Frank Montes de Oca and Laura's Chief for a smooth registration process. We thank Sodexo, especially Alex Munoz and Chef Antonio, for the wonderful food you're having today and tomorrow. We thank Carla Arellano and Union Services for help with site logistics. We thank KTEP for having Louis Sines interview me about the conference. We thank our upstairs friends at Academic Technologies who lent us several people to help with the conference and our wonderful collaborators throughout the year. And we thank our friends at University Communications. Also this year, we have 10 terrific sponsors. See, the number 10 comes up again. The 10 terrific sponsors, they're listed on the inside front cover of the program. And I should also add a note that the College of Liberal Arts donation specifically went towards today's lunch, and the College of Business donation went in part towards the ROTA recognition you just saw. So thank you for all of our sponsors. Let's give them all a hand. Their support not only publicly testifies to the importance of teaching, but helps CTAL offer registration rates below actual cost to maximize access, because we're not the richest place in the world. Unlike Ireland, where capital is always Dublin. Okay, that's my St. Patrick's Day reference there. So, CTAL Fellows, if you are here, please stand so we can recognize you. All CTAL Fellows that are here, thank you for your help in proposal reviewing, session moderating for this conference, in the sounding board during this exciting time in CTAL's history. Speaking of exciting times, here are some exciting upcoming dates, some of which are not on the handout. So you can see some events we have coming up. There's a very powerful movie in May, Beyond Measure, that has a connection to Roger Gonzalez on our campus. as well as our dates like fall instructor retreat and things like that. So stay in touch with everything in CTEL by being on our mailing list if you're not already. And also keep an eye out for a special email for an invitation-only reception, end of year reception in early May. The only people who went to a CTEL event will get to know about. So teaching and learning experientially. I'm personally very excited about this year's theme. Let me just share my history. Before UTEP, I taught full-time at a high school with an experiential learning component. And it was really a neat thing to go with students on trips ranging from an afternoon in a mosque to a week-long journey through the Deep South. And I saw students reflect and grow from these experiences. But to be honest, back then I was really mainly a chaperone. I didn't design the events. And at UTEP, I really found a whole new level when you actually integrate the experiential learning with your discipline, your teaching, and even your scholarship. For example, my first year at UTEP, I taught a class for future teachers that had a lot more authenticity by being held at an elementary school, where we got to interact regularly with the school's teachers and students, and have UTEP students help run a family math night for school children's families, and that yielded a lot of powerful experiences as well as papers. I'm just curious who else in this room has already had some type of experiential teaching and learning experiences, because you may already be doing it without realizing it. But raise your hand if you feel like you have already done some kind of experiential teaching. Okay, so fair amount. Here's some examples of experiential, in case you're wondering what counts as that. This is obviously not a complete list, but this is what we have in the program. So now that you see the list, raise your hand if you have tried at least one of these forms in your classes. At least one. Okay? Raise your hand if you've tried most of them. Anyone? Wow. Okay, neat. Very good. Okay, so the fact that almost no one raised their hand on the second question is good, because that means we all have a lot to learn from today's keynote speaker as well as tomorrow's keynote panel, who are going to show us lots of different options. So 3 quick quotations on experience. Albert Einstein says the only source of knowledge is experience, which is interesting considering he's a theoretical physicist, right? Dancer Isadora Duncan said, what one has not experienced, one will never understand in print. And finally, to sort of look at it from both sides, German philosopher Immanuel Kant said, experience without theory is blind, but theory without experience is mere intellectual play. Okay, I know. So, how is this year's theme chosen? Glad you asked. During that first CTEL Fellows meeting, after last year's Sun Conference, we had a brainstorming session. And it yielded about 4 interesting ideas, and one of them was experiential learning. And I changed that to teaching and learning experientially, because teaching and learning needed to be part of the equation. But what sealed the deal for me was when I saw that it paralleled parts of UTEP's Quality Enhancement Plan, QEP, that was taking shape at that time and was just released last month. We will hear a little more about the QEP in just a few minutes, and you'll see for yourself some of the overlap and how some forms of experiential learning that I've shown you actually are also on the QEP High Impact Practices list on page 48 of your program, like undergraduate research and study abroad and service learning. And so these are practices that you will hear quite a bit about during the keynotes and other sessions. And so the reason we make this connection to QEP is because that means our conference theme this year is not just a theme for 2 days and then put it away. It's something that's going to set the tone for the next decade at UTEP as we identify and integrate the QEP more deeply. But those of you here who are non-UTEP people, I hope will also find our QEP endeavors interesting, because it intimately connects with global current trends in renewing the purpose and value of education and re-examining what its structure should look like. For a somewhat dramatic example that I came across just last month, the MIT Dean for Graduate Education is taking a year's leave this May to create a non-profit residential university centered on project-based learning, with no majors, no lectures, no classrooms, and all students working on research. So, yeah, it's interesting to see what happens. And so, we get to now give this topic some local context from UTEP's QEP writers, Maggie Smith and David Ruiter. Dr. Ruiter is the Associate Provost for Student and Faculty Success and an Associate Professor of English. Dr. Smith is professor and chair of the English department, and also a co-chair of the QEP development team. Ruiter and Smith are the two faculty leads of the QEP administrative and writing support team, and we ask them now to come up and make some brief remarks before I introduce the keynote speaker.
I'm only David, not Maggie too. Maggie is sitting right here, and if you have a few questions, she's going to help us with those in just a few minutes. First of all, let me just say how delighted I am to see this full room of educators. It's very, very impressive. It's been nice to meet Scott over lunch as well. He's doing terrific work from which we can all benefit. I do want to take just a couple of minutes to talk to you about the QEP, the Quality Enhancement Plan. But for this group, I won't refer to it ongoingly as the Quality Enhancement Plan, but as a culture change that's happening on the UTEP campus that involves experiential learning. But before I start, I thought we might just go ahead and play a quick video. We think represents our effort fairly well, and then I'll talk just a little bit more about it. Really short video. In the room over there, all right, and his team for putting that video together for us. So, in just a few minutes, first of all, in your program, you probably have seen this little pamphlet, so I don't need to go over everything. Well, this is what we have found at UTEP for our students, that most of our students are currently participating in one of the high-impact practices that you just saw up here. We have a more limited population participating in two, and on from there. What we know is that a student who participates in at least two of the high-impact practices massively improves her or his opportunity to remain in college, to finish his or her degree, and to move positively on to work in their careers. And so we've decided, as an institution, to make this the heart of the educational experience at UTEP. So all the things that you're talking about, session by session, the things that you're reading about and sharing with each other via social media and Larry's tweets. And for those of you who need that whiteboard out there as well, all right, like me. But, excuse me. 1 second. Here we go. Some of you may have noted that allergies are a little rough here this time of year. Anyway, okay, sorry, I'm not getting choked up with emotion, but I'm getting choked up. All right, so, but we're really excited about this. We have presented this with our students, with our faculty, with our staff, All of these high impact practices that you just saw there, we are creating greater access for all of our students to improve participation. And we are looking forward to seeing them truly believing in and feeling confident in the strengths of their strengths and assets. We know that our students, we are an open access university, come to us with strengths and assets that are in many respects beyond those of their peers, or more well-heeled potentially peers. We do have a lot of students here whose family income is under $20,000 a year. The majority of our students here work. The majority of our students are first generation. But those things that have typically, in conversations about American higher education, been represented as deficits, as obstacles to their success, we are seen as features of our students that can propel them to even greater success than they have maybe yet imagined. And that is going to be done by allowing them to see through these experiential learning opportunities and the high-impact practices what they bring to the table, how it's valuable in the workplace, and so that when they go and present themselves in the global community and the world of work, they feel confident in those aspects of their profiles. So we do have a signature piece. If you do have a moment to look at this trifold later, you'll see there's a signature piece for them called the Professionally Prepared Portfolio. In the fall of 2017, every student who's entering UTEP for the first time is going to begin to participate in this professionally prepared portfolio. That's demonstrating to them an expectation to participate in at least 2 of the high impact practices and to reflect on those activities in meaningful ways. We want our students to succeed. We're all in this room together because that's a very, very meaningful part of our work. And we know through experiential learning that their success can be enhanced. It really is a pleasure to be in a room full of people who believe in those things and who are carrying out that mission day to day. And as a representative of the Provost's office here at UTEP, I hope you enjoy the conference very, very much. I will be happy to talk with you at any time further about the plan, the website. On this information, you can find the website, and you'll soon be able to find a link to me and to Dr. Smith as well. And we'd love to continue the conversation over the years ahead. It is a 10-year, it is, to be clear, a 10-year plan to transform the educational experience here at UTEP. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And so we are ready for the future presentation. So we are very glad to learn today with a scholar and author of journal articles and several books. These are the books you can see if you go to his webpage. And he can lead us to understanding of experiential teaching and learning. In fact, I have a hunch he won't just be lecturing about it to us, but including opportunities for us to discuss or experience the ideas and issues. I'll just share a couple of highlights from his bio, which is on page 6 in your program, and I'll also add a couple facts not in it. So Scott Wurdinger is a professor of experiential education and leadership studies at MNSU. I know that looks like a typo to some people because we're so used to NMSU in this region, right? But no, this is MNSU. Minnesota State University at Mankato. I didn't know where Mankato was either, but as you can see, it's south of Minneapolis there, southwest. He researches various approaches to experiential learning and how they develop life skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. A non-academic fun fact I learned about Dr. Wurdinger is that in his free time, he enjoys road biking and Nordic skiing. In fact, I think it's snowing today in Minneapolis, so he's very glad to be here in the Sun City where we don't have those problems. And he did not come in just for the keynote, as he arrived yesterday in time to have a dinner meeting and spent this morning giving a wonderful 2-hour workshop on experiential learning. And so now let's have Dr. Wurdinger experience a warm Sun Conference welcome.
I'm not ready yet. So before I get started, I have a story for you. It was about a year ago when I was attending a conference and doing a presentation on project-based learning that I was involved with this group of individuals focusing on competency-based education. And while we were standing around, there was some downtime, while we were standing around, I heard this elderly gentleman talking about having breakfast with his wife that morning. And I was listening to him and he said, you know, I got up this morning and we're having breakfast and my wife had heard something on the news and she asked me this question. And the question was, what is twerking? And he stood there for a minute and he said, you know, I didn't have an answer, but I wanted to come up with one. So I said, that's tweeting at work. So Larry, believe it or not, was just twerking. So that twerking kind of reminds me of experiential learning in a way, because that story, when I heard him say that, and obviously he found out differently when he got home from work that night, but that story reminds me of experiential learning because experiential learning is often misinterpreted. And to give you an example, I was working with a group of middle school teachers, and I told this story this morning at my workshop. But I was working with them, and we were going through some activities, and it just so happened that my daughter was in the class of one of these teachers. And she came home, and I said, "What did you do today?" And she said, "It was great. We went on a field trip." And I said, "What did you do?" And she was a cross-country runner at the time, and she said, "We went running on the trails in this park." And I said, "So what was the agenda for the field trip?" She goes, "We could do whatever we wanted to do." And I think that's one of the misinterpretations of experiential learning, is that as long as you get them out of the classroom, outside, that's experiential learning. And we need to do more than that. And I'm going to explain that later on in my presentation. But I think it's often misrepresented, misinterpreted, as was John Dewey, who wrote volumes on experience and education. And when I studied Dewey in graduate school, I found out how often Dewey was misinterpreted in the scholarship. So a little context about who I am, and I think it's important because the context provides you some information about why I'm here today. I always feel humbled when people ask me to come and do a keynote speech, because I always feel like what I have to say really isn't that important, but I'm going to try and make this as important and powerful and meaningful and relevant as possible for you, so that you can take some of these ideas back with you and start to implement experiential learning. Because experiential learning basically saved me when I was in high school and college. I grew up in a very small town in Iowa. Academics was not important in my family. My parents wanted me to pursue sports more than academics. So my dad pushed me pretty hard in football and baseball and basketball, and that was really the focus of this small, as it is in many rural small towns in Iowa and the Midwest. Sports are very, very important. And so academically, I didn't really care about my courses in high school. And luckily, I had one instructor in high school who taught environmental education, and I took that course, and we did experiential learning. Probably unbeknownst to him, but we were doing experiential learning. We were outside the classroom, we went on trips, we looked at fossils, we brought them back, we put them under microscopes. We did a canoe trip down the Upper Iowa River in northeast Iowa, and it was exhilarating, and it was fun, and it was exciting. And as I went through my high school and undergraduate days, I was very lucky to have mentors who used experiential learning. And that's why I say it basically saved me, because they saw something in me and they wanted me to pursue education. So my undergraduate days, I had a biology professor, same situation, was outside the class a lot, doing experiences firsthand. And he said, Scott, I think you ought to be a biology major. And as a mentor, I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. If this is what biology is all about, that's what I want to do. But unfortunately, as I went through some of my biology courses, other biology courses, it was mostly lecturing and note-taking and test-taking. I had a guidance counselor. About the time I was ready to graduate from high school, I had a guidance counselor who told me not to go to college because my scores on my ACTs were not high enough. And once again, I have to go back to these teachers that were using experiential learning in their classrooms that really got me excited about learning and going on further for higher education. I told this also this morning, but it took me 8 years to get through my undergraduate degree. And it wasn't because I wasn't, excited or I was a slow learner. It was because a lot of times I would read information in a textbook and I got really excited about it. And yet, so much of my undergraduate education was about lectures, test taking, and memorization as a result, as a learning process. And so I realized that I had to get out and experience things firsthand. So I remember reading about Dave Meach and trapping timber wolves in the boundary waters up in northern Minnesota. And at the end of that course, I called Dave Meach and I said, do you need a wolf trapper? I'd like to come up and trap timber wolves for you. He said, yeah. He said, I just lost a wolf trapper and I'd love to have you come up and trap timber wolves. So I spent a year trapping timber wolves, putting radio collars on them, putting ear tags, taking blood, going out on snowshoes in the middle of winter, traveling around the boundary waters, tracking their routes and where they were traveling, and found it was fascinating. It was just fascinating. And I realized at that point in time that was a primary experience. Dewey talks about primary experiences and secondary experiences. And reading a textbook is like a secondary experience. And my primary experience, I realized I was doing that firsthand, but when I was in college, I was reading about the secondary experiences of someone else doing that experience or having that experience. And now I was engaged in a primary experience. So I realized that this is the way that people should learn. This is the way I learn best. This is the way that I think a lot of people learn best, is through direct experience. So my lens for my presentation today is a cognitive lens. There are many different definitions of experiential education. Some people view it more as a social definition, some people psychological definitions. I view it as a cognitive process that was kind of outlined and depicted by John Dewey back in 1938. And I'm going to get into that in just a second, but I want to show you one other thing. So my experiences as an undergraduate and graduate student really was a pathway for me to pursue ultimately a PhD in experiential education. So why do we need experiential learning? These are a few of the stats, and this is in, I had to put a plug in for my book here in 2012. But these are not my stats, but they're in my book. And different individuals who did research on these different topics found out that, students just aren't enjoying their high school or college education. And primarily, it's because they're bored and don't like the learning process they're involved in. Okay, so back to what is experiential learning. My Flickr has a quick draw on it, so. People ask me this question all the time. And my answer to this question often changes depending upon the situation. If someone, I'm in my elevator speech, they come in and a real quick answer is it's hands-on learning. It's learning by doing. And you hear that a lot. And so that's one way to look at it. But my definition is very specific. And it's more than just hands-on learning. So as David and Maggie were talking about the different high-impact practices, those are outside the classroom, which are excellent. But it's not just, experiential learning is not just about place. It's about process. It's about a cognitive process. And I've taken Dewey's pattern of inquiry, which was written back in, there was a book written about logic back in 1938 by John Dewey. And one of the chapters in that book is called The Pattern of Inquiry. And in that process, there's a bunch of steps. And I basically took those steps and boiled them down to 4 steps. And it's basically the scientific methodology, where you have a problem, a plan, test, and reflect. Those 4 steps. Experiential learning should consist of a challenging problem, but the problem is really the critical aspect of experiential learning. Because if you can excite the student and motivate the student to learn, the rest of this cycle will take care of itself. But the key is to motivate and excite the student. That means you have to find a problem that is relevant and meaningful to the student. That's the key. And I've seen it happen in my classes many, many times, where I've asked students to find something that's relevant and meaningful for them, and then I just sit back and watch the learning process occur. So this is the context for my speech today, is Dewey's pattern of inquiry. You saw my answers to the question. Okay, there we go. All right, so what I want you to do next is to, at your tables, to talk for a few minutes. As an experiential educator, I can't lecture here for an hour and 15 minutes. I gotta have some interaction with you. And so what I want you to do is talk about this question for the next 5 minutes at your tables. Go.